So welcome to another video with Inside the Nocode Academy, and in this particular video, super excited about this one because we've got the BuildShip OpenAI Assistant Node that is landed. That's going to simplify all of your interactions to the OpenAI Assistant. Now, this particular video, we're going to create a chatbot that you can easily introduce into your own application to basically provide your users the ability to have context focus support for your particular application, and you'll be able to walk through and you'll be able to create exactly the same thing for your own applications. So we're going to use BuildShip and we're going to use FlutterFlow. Let's get into the video and let's get cracking. Okay then, so this is the official page that talks about the AI Assistant node within inside the BuildShip website. What we're going to do though is we're going to focus our attention on building something very, very similar to this. We're going to use the power of this new particular node to kind of produce kind of like a context-focused chatbot for your particular application, your FlutterFlow application. We're going to break it down into two parts. We're going to first focus on the BuildShip kind of workflow, and then of course we're going to take everything we learned there into FlutterFlow, and then we'll start creating something from scratch that you can then lift and shift or at least apply in your own FlutterFlow projects as well. So let's go over to the demo, let's have a look at the application, and then we're going to get building. Okay, so here is the final application, which will be available as a link in the description, so please do grab that. There's also a starter project in there as well to kind of get you to kind of the foundation where we can use this particular series and we can start building on everything we learn, and of course you can walk through together. So I'm just going to click on the little fab icon that appears out from the bottom here. Now this AI kind of window kind of pops up, our component that pops up inside FlutterFlow, and I can just say my computer is overheating, something like that. Hit the send option, and of course the way this is calling out to BuildShip now is passing in that particular question to our context focus assistant, and of course it's just gonna have a little think about it, and then of course it's then going to come back hopefully with a response. So there is a response, and of course we can now carry on this particular conversation, and let's say tell me more about the GPU, something like that. Hit the little send option, has a little think about it, and of course it will then go away and hopefully get a response, and there it is. So it's gone away, it's kind of carried on the conversation, it's carried on the thread, all via BuildShip, all via the kind of the AI assistant sort of node that they've created. So that's what we're going to build in this particular episode. So let's get into it. Okay, so here we are within my project with inside BuildShip itself. Now, if we were trying to create this functionality with inside BuildShip by using the kind of the old method, and that is creating a number of different workflows to kind of like create the thread, we then add the message to the thread, we then have to then run the assistant, and of course we then need to check those runs. Has the assistant finished? Has it done its thing? And then of course we can then return back the messages once that assistant has completed. You can see here that there's a number of different kind of steps that we have to kind of walk through. Well, then this all now changes because the AI system within inside BuildShip itself is so much more compact. It does all of the hard work for us, and that is what we're now going to get building with inside this particular section. Okay, before we get started, there is two things that we need before we build out our workflow. The first thing is we need to make sure that we've got an account on the openai.com's website. Here I am all signed in. I have my assistant created. Make sure you've got that created as well with the instructions that we're going to need for our chatbot. And here you can see here the main thing is we've got our assistant ID. You're going to need to make sure you have that to hand because we're going to put that into BuildShip very shortly. And the final thing we're going to need is an API key as well. Just hit on the API key here, get one generated. And of course, make sure you've got some credit in the system as well. If you're trying to do it on a free account, you're going to get no response back. So make sure that you put a little bit of credit in the system ready to use your API key. Once you've got two of those things, let's now move back over to BuildShip and let's start building the workflow. Okay, so let's start now creating the workflow. So I'm going to go into BuildShip. I'm going to hit the little plus here. I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to just call this one Assistant Chat, something like that. Hit create. And we should have a nice brand new one that's created. Let's now add a trigger. Now we're going to invoke this by FlutterFlow by using a REST API call. So choose add trigger. Let's choose REST API call, add the trigger itself, and we need to give our path a name. So let's just call this one chatbot, something like that there. Now the post is going to be the request in, so we need to configure that here. We need to configure that in FlutterFlow as well. Once we've got that selected as a post, hit on the three dots at the top here, edit, because we are going to pass in two parameters. We're going to pass in the prompt. This is the bit of text that we're going to be passing into the OpenAI, and we're also going to be passing in the thread. Now on the first run of this, we're not going to have a thread we're going to be passing in, but what's going to happen is it's going to determine that, and then it's then going to create a thread for it to then be returned back to FlutterFlow. We need to store that within FlutterFlow so we can keep the conversation going. We can keep passing in that thread with every additional prompt. So with the body selected, hit plus. And let's go to the first one here, and let's give this one a name. So I'm just going to call this one thread ID. This will have a label, and I'm just going to call this one thread ID like that. And then in the type, it's going to remain there as a string. And let's add a brand new one in. Let's choose on the rename there, the prompt as well. So there it is as a key. Let's give this a name of prompt like that. And of course, that is going to be a string as well. Once that's all set up, hit the save, and that is all ready to go. So next up, we're going to then use a convenience node within sort of BuildShip itself, and this is just going to be like a trim. So choose do a search for trim, choose a trim string, and now what's going to happen here is we're going to pass in kind of like an empty string. It's going to have like a space in it, and we just need to trim that down to just be an empty string to represent that there's no thread that's going to be passed in. If we don't do this, what will happen is that when we call out to the OpenAI and we pass in like a null or something like that, then the OpenAI is going to return back an error response. We've got to prevent that from happening. So let's just select now the kind of the actual value that's going to come in. So just choose on the variables here, go to the request, and we're going to choose the body. And then here you can see that we've got the thread ID. So just choose that, and that's going to be passed in itself. And then what will happen is this trim string will then return back that thread ID. So I can just click on this here, and I'm just going to call this one thread ID like that, so we can reference it by name very, very shortly. So once we've got that, the next one we want to add then, of course, is the magic. This is where all of the work happens, and that's in this OpenAI Assistant. So just choose that, and then we need to put some details in here. So first thing we're going to want to do is go over to the cog here, and we're going to go down to our secret keys. Now, I've already got one called OpenAI. You need to add to your secret key, and this is where you're going to get your API key that you would have had with inside the platform openai.com website. So have that long string, create one called OpenAI or whatever you would like it to be, and then we can then now use that back with inside our assistant sort of workflow. So where it says API key, hit the pen, and we're going to go to the variables here. In fact, we're going to go to the secrets, so get the right place, and choose Open API. Just select that, and that's all that you need to do. Is going to pull in that, obviously, that secret into that particular field. Now here is where we need to get the assistant ID. So of course, if you copied this, and you could then make that available here, or one alternative that you can do is you can go up to the actual assistant here, just choose this and go to where it says variables. You can choose this environment variables option. So just select environment variables. You can say add actual environment variable here. So what this is going to kind of do is if you are using this assistant in a number of different workflows with inside your project, then you can either create a kind of a project level environment variable that you can use in a number of different places, or you can use it just with inside this particular workflow. So this is really great that if you had multiple call outs to the OpenAI, then you can all be using the same assistant ID that's going to be pulled from an environment variable, which means you've only got to change it in one place, and it'll be then obviously reflected across the rest of your projects or your workflows, whatever. So what we're going to do, we're going to create a brand new one, and we're just going to call this one assistant sort of like underscore ID like that. Now we're going to go and quickly grab our value from the OpenAI website. Just paste that in there. There it is, all saved. And I can say here the scope, all workflows on this project, or just to this workflow only. Well, I'm only going to use it in this particular workflow, so I'm just going to say this workflow only and hit save. That's all there. And what I can do, if you can see here, just click on the little toggle there, and you can see that is now there. So we can just close that down. And of course, I can now choose the assistant ID environment variable there, and that's now going to be now available to the OpenAI assistant. Now, the instructions, we don't need to pass in any kind of instructions into this particular one. You can see here the little pop-up is talking about kind of modifying the behavior. We don't need to change the system message because that is part of our assistant. Now, the user prompt, of course, that is the question that's going to be passed in. So just choose the little pen here, go to the variables, go to the request, and it's the body that we need, and we're going to pick out the prompt. This is the kind of the body parameter that we created earlier. So just choose prompt. That's all that we need to do. And here is the thread ID. Now you can see here that we've called it thread ID up here. We've trimmed it down to an empty kind of string. We can choose this option here. We can go to the variables, and of course we can just choose the thread ID just like that. And that will be then a string. Now that's all that we need to do. Now, of course, if you are researching this particular node with inside the BuildShip website. I highly encourage you to kind of read their documentation, because it can create, it's demonstrating lots of different examples where you can use the OpenAI Assistant. So for example, you can be uploading kind of your more documents and all that kind of stuff to your OpenAI Assistant, and of course that could then use that information and all that kind of stuff. So I recommend that you kind of look at all the different options that you've got here for sort of extending the power of the OpenAI Assistant. And we're just using it in a more chat and a more refined way, but please do sort of have a look at the documentation, because of course you can now add additional nodes here where the OpenAI Assistant can kind of think, okay, well I can see what you're trying to say here, but actually I'm going to go out and I'm going to go and do some additional kind of steps with inside the actual workflow. I can go and kind of read a CSV, or I can go to a Google Docs, or whatever it needs to be. There's lots of different kind of activities that can happen down here, but we're just going to keep it really, really simple for now. We're just going to kind of do what we're asking it to do, and then we're going to return that information back to FlutterFlow. Okay, so let's just add our return in now. So hit the plus here. We're just going to then return back here. So if I can just hit the little return option, and of course we're going to return back a status. Okay, we're going to make a lot of assumptions here that everything has gone according to plan. But of course, if you are building this out in a more production way, you're going to want to make sure you put all the checks in there. Of course, if you don't get the right response back from the OpenAI, you might want to handle that a little bit more gracefully. But we're just going to kind of handle the return back. Whatever the OpenAI Assistant returns, we're going to pass that back to our FlutterFlow application. But you can either handle that inside FlutterFlow, or you can handle that with inside BuildShip. So within the value, just hit the little pen here. Now I'm just going to change this to a JavaScript response. Now I'm just going to put some details in here. So if you've been watching any of my other kind of sort of videos with inside the channel and all that kind of stuff, then you would know that I quite like to kind of return back here a kind of a happy day kind of okay message on the status. I might want to use that for any particular reason inside FlutterFlow. What I'm also going to return here is actually a result, and that result is quite simply going to be everything it is going to be returned from the actual OpenAI response. So just choose variables here. I'm going to go to OpenAI Assistant, just select that, and I'm just going to choose the OpenAI Assistant here at the top. You can narrow it down a little bit if you would like, just kind of for a more convenience to kind of drill down to various sort of parts of the response. But we're going to kind of return everything back to our FlutterFlow application and let our FlutterFlow application kind of determine what it's going to display with inside the actual chat window itself. But of course you can adjust this however you would like. I'm going to choose the OpenAI Assistant object, and everything is going to be returned back. That is pretty well much all that we need to do. But the good thing is about BuildShip, of course, is we can test this particular workflow. So let's now head over and give this a test. Okay, so before we actually ship this and make this workflow available, let's give it a quick test. Hit the little test option up here, and we're going to want to pass in a body. So we're just going to kind of simulate kind of what FlutterFlow is going to be doing on an API request. So if inside the body, let's now open that up with the curly braces. Let's first pass in the thread ID like that. That is going to be how it's going to be with a colon. We're going to put in a space in here because of course we're going to trim that down. And then here, we're going to pass in the actual prompt itself. So that, and we're just going to put a test here. So let's do the same thing as similar to what I did before. I am having overheating issues with my computer, something like that. Let's test the workflow. So we'll take a moment on first run. Of course, it's doing the building and now it's doing the execution as well. If we've made any mistakes, we'll go and correct those. But let's see what it comes back with. It's executing now. Okay, you can start seeing it now kind of going through the various stages, and here we are. It looks like we've got a positive response back. Have you checked to see if there are any dust clogging, blah, 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 blah. There's all of our details. There's all of the kind of the deep dive kind of response object that we got coming back. So we're going to kind of hook onto these. You can see here the kind of the content here, the text. We're going to create a data type with inside FlutterFlow to grab hold of the content, and we're going to map the JSON response here that you're getting into those data types with inside FlutterFlow itself. But that looks like everything is working for us. We can just hit the little ship. Okay, so that's now shipping for us now. There it goes. It's all available to us. We've now got an endpoint that we can now hook onto. So I'm just going to copy that endpoint URL, and then we can now move over to FlutterFlow, and let's start now getting to the meat of building the actual front end. Okay, then here we are then in FlutterFlow. This is the starter project. Please do clone this link in the description. And this is what you be presented with. This is a real vanilla FlutterFlow application. So this is no different for you having your own project and you also carrying out the same steps. So on the home page, what I'm going to do is first add a fab button into the bottom. We're going to activate that chat window, type in FAB. I'm just going to scroll to the bottom and I'm going to choose the fab option just here. Now let's just style this up a little bit. Let's change the icon. So let's do a search for this particular icon, question, this one here on the right hand side, question, answer, outline. Just select that. Let's select the color, icon color. Let's give this an alternative color like that. It'd be nice and white there. Let's just increase the size to 30. So now that is all in place, we can now move over to now a bit of a helper, because what we're going to do is we're going to add a brand new page into this particular project that's going to kind of bring in a lot of boilerplate that we can then style and use with inside our application. Now, thankfully, the FlutterFlow team have already created a template which we can customize for this particular project. So let's move up to the plus up the top here. We can go to then the flows. Now the FlutterFlow team are doing a fantastic job of creating these kind of flows that we can kind of bring into our application that contains not only functionality, but a lot of screen designs as well. We're just going to choose a very simple one here. This ChatGPT component, choose add to project. This is going to bring in some components and it's going to set up an API for us. We're going to strip out all the stuff that we're not interested in. Hit add to project and let's call this ChatGPT component. That's fine. Hit create. And what we can do is we can see here on the left hand side that we've got this component folder created, and you can see here that we've got a component, we've got a screen here. We don't actually need the screen, so let's just get rid of that, just delete that page out, just hit yes. So we're just left with our component. That is fine. We're going to kind of tinker this very, very shortly. We're going to kind of customize this a little bit. But other than that, what we need to do is we're going to very simply just activate this particular component within inside our UI. So go back to the home page. Let's go to the actual fab button itself, move over to the action flow editor. So just make sure you kind of got the floating action button selected there. Open up the action flow editor and let's add in an action. So on the top here, we're going to kind of load up this kind of like custom sort of dialogue. So just choose the custom dialogue option after I've done the search here. Select the component. Now the one that we need to select is the AI chat component. Just select that. And of course we can now set some kind of parameters here for the dimensions. So this is going to be 360 by 680 in height like that. Everything else is going to remain the same. Of course, we can come back and we can change some of these parameters if we like, but that is pretty good. Hit the close option there. So we now know that if we run this project up, if we did do that, hit that button and we'll kind of get that component kind of displayed kind of nice and centrally within inside the UI. So just very quickly then back in BuildShip, just to set a little bit of context of what we're next going to do in FlutterFlow. If you remember when we did this test, we had the response coming back from the OpenAI platform. If I just scroll down here, you'll see here that I've just clapped some messages. This is the section that we're going to kind of drill into with inside our FlutterFlow application. We're going to get that response back. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of grab hold of the kind of the top level message. And what we can see with inside this top level message here, we can see some content and we can see a type. Now the content is just simply kind of like holding our type, which is going to be the text there, and the actual result that comes back here. So this is the text and then the value. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a data type called content, and that is going to contain a data type called text, and that text is going to have a value in it. Okay, so we're going to kind of map this JSON response, of course, then to our FlutterFlow objects within inside the application. So now we've got that, let's move back over to FlutterFlow and let's start now creating those data types. Okay, so back within FlutterFlow, then move over to the data types option on the left hand side. Let's create our first data types. The first one they're going to create is actually the text one. So this is the one that's within inside the content. So let's just call this one a text like this, hit create. Now our text is going to have then a value. So just choose value. The data type is going to be a string. That's going to contain the kind of the chat value that comes back, the kind of the chat text that comes back from OpenAI. Hit create. So the next one they're going to create then is going to be then the content. Hit create on the content. Add the field. Now what we're going to do is add the text one in. We can choose the data type itself. So just go to the data type option here, and here just choose then the text. So we're going to kind of say, well, here, this is going to be called text, but it's going to have a type of text. Hit create. One more that we just need then to add in, and this is just the type there that was a string of value, which we'll just map anyway. So just hit create. So that is all created for us. We have our content that contains our text, which is our data type, and then we are now good to go with our data types. Okay, so now that we've got our data types set up, we now need to put them into action. And what we're going to do is we're going to create some state variables within inside our component to kind of keep track of the chat history. So just make sure you've got the AI chat component selected here. On the right hand side, we can remove some of this stuff out. We don't actually need the chat history. So let's remove that. We're going to create our own implementation of that. The input string, what we'll do, we'll actually rename it. I think we're going to call this one thread ID. Within inside this particular component, we're going to track the thread that comes back from the OpenAI on the first response, so then we can keep passing that back in and keep the conversation going. That's going to be needed, so we're going to keep that there like that. That is it. We're just going to put a space in here actually, and because we don't want it to be nullable, we don't want to be sending null to the actual to BuildShip itself. So just put a space in it. That's going to be super important. And of course, we're going to trim that out with inside the BuildShip workflow, which you've already seen in part 1. So with that selected, now we need to go to add field here. Let's create a brand new chat history like that, and then our type is going to be our data type that we just created here. We're going to say it's a list. We'll choose the type, and this is going to be the content, because as you remember, the text is within inside the content itself. Hit confirm like that, and that is fine. With the AI responding, we're going to keep that available to us, because that is kind of like determine whether this little indicator gets displayed within inside the UI. So next we're going to move over to then the actions. Let's have a look then at this little send action down here. This is the user's going to invoke this, going to type their message in, they're going to hit the send, and of course some actions are going to play out. Now let's bring up the action flow editor. Now all of this kind of stuff I'm not interested in. Actually, we're going to rebuild all of this from scratch. It's probably better to do that than try to rework that we got here. So I'm just going to delete all of these. So they're all now gone. So I'm going to close that for now. We're going to come back to that very shortly. Now, if we scroll up here, you can see we've got this list view. And at the moment, this is now up here. You can see that because we've removed out the old chat history, we kind of got this chat variables. Every single instance here of the chat is going to be this chat here. Now, of course, the value is unknown. So we're now going to want to select the actual component state kind of variable that we've created. So just choose a component state here and choose the chat history and hit the confirm. That's what we're going to, and hit save. That's what we're now going to use with inside this list view. So once we've done that, of course, we've got kind of in here, we've got content here. That is currently mapped to a kind of like an old variable that we're not interested in. So we can now change this. Now we can map this actually to the equivalent with inside our actual kind of data type now with inside that chat history. So with each one of these selected, we'll just choose the first one here, move up to the text. Let's just change that. Let's edit that. And we're going to go to the chat item. We're then going to choose the available option. We're going to choose the data structure field. We're then going to select the field. This is going to be the text. Now I'm going to choose the available options here. I'm going to say data structure field. And now with inside that, we're going to choose the values. We've kind of got the content here. We've gone into the text, and now we're going to pull out the value of that. So just hit confirm. Once we've got that, I'm going to select the little 3 selectors here again, and I'm just going to select the 3 dots, copy the variable, because we're going to do the same thing just over here as well. Just select up here. Let's just remove that out. Just select it again, and then just paste that in and just hit confirm, and that's going to get the same equivalent behavior on that particular side. Now, one thing we've got here as well is we've got this kind of like this copy sort of response. Now, with inside this particular kind of container here, you can see we've got an action, and that action is really just kind of grabbing hold of that value and grabbing that inside the actual clipboard itself. So with that selected, with that container selected, move over to the actions, bring up the action flow editor. We've got the copy to clipboard, and this is showing an error right now, so we can just select this little selector again, and then we can just click here and say paste variable like that and say confirm, and it's going to do exactly the same thing as well as we just did just a moment ago. Just hit close like that. So that is good to go for now. Okay, so just while we're here then, let's just clear out some of this nasty looking UI presentation. So it's obviously gone a little bit wrong because we kind of brought this kind of flow actually into our application, so we don't want to kind of make it look like it is right off the flow itself. So with the container selected here just under the blur, let's get rid of this grey background. With the fill color, just select that here, Move down to primary background like that. Now within each of these particular containers here, so just with those selected, the first one here, just move down here to the fill color, just select that, and we're going to choose a secondary background. We're just going to do the same thing here as well with that one selected, and just choose this to also be then the secondary background itself. And then what we could do is we want to just adjust this little, this kind of little sort of writing indicator here. So just with this one selected, choose the container, and let's just move down here to the fill color, and let's do the same. Do the same thing as well. Let's choose the secondary color as well. That looks a little bit better. So go back to the home page, and go back to the actual chat component, and you'll see now that that's looking just a little bit nicer. Of course, please go ahead and kind of style this up however you need. That should be good. Oh, in fact, I think there's a couple of adjustments we need to make. This is quite a responsive kind of chat window actually, but we're just, in this particular example, we're going to keep it constrained to a mobile as well. So what will happen is if we fire this up, the chances are that these particular chat windows are going to kind of get overflow errors because they're going to kind of appear outside of the boundaries of a mobile device. So with actually these containers selected, so let's just choose the first chat container there. Let's move down here. You can see there's some responsive kind of properties that's kind of selected here. Just with this selected, just move down here. Let's just change this one here to then 260. Like that, and hit confirm. We also want to do the same for this particular container just here as well. Just scroll down here, move down to the max width here, just scroll down here and adjust that then to 260. That will just kind of make it a little bit more narrower within inside the actual UI itself, but feel free to have a play with those depending on how you are implementing this inside your own application. Okay then, so it's time to configure our API call that's going to connect to the BuildShip endpoint, our workflow. So on the left hand side, choose the API calls section. You can see here that when we introduced the FlutterFlow flow, it created an OpenAI ChatGPT group and API endpoint. We're not interested in these, so just hit delete on the group and they should be all gone. Let's add a brand new group in here. Now, of course, I'm not on the free plan here with FlutterFlow. If you're on the free plan, that you can only add in an API call, but here I'm just going to create a group, and I'm going to call this group then BuildShip like that. Base API URL is going to be the full URL. I'm just going to delete off the /chatbot because we're going to add that into the API call itself. So that's at group level. That's all configured for us. Hit add the group. Now I'm going to move down here into the add API call here, and I'm just going to give our API call a name. I'm just going to call this chat like that. Choose the method type here of a post, and here the endpoint, the REST endpoint was called chatbot like that. Now we need to create some variables. Now if you recall that we had the thread ID and the prompt, we now need to create these. So thread and then uppercase ID like that. Then with a type, I'm going to choose string, add a brand new variable here, call this one prompt. This is going to take in our text for our API call, and then it's going to be string. This is going to kind of be the kind of the text we put into that send box there. That's all added. Now create a body. And inside our body, we're just going to now choose the JSON option. And of course in here, just like what we did when we were testing the actual sample itself, let's now just create the same body that we had there. So we got our first one, which was prompt like that. And this is I'm going to pass in the prompt for this here, and just put a little comma. Let's add another one in here, and this is going to be the thread itself. Oh, I keep doing that. Sorry, my keyboard's running the wrong way around. Thread ID like that. And then we are going to then do just going to drag the thread ID actually into that one there, and that should be all good. We can just hit format. We didn't get any errors come up, so everything's looking pretty good for us. So I think we're all good to go. Just hit the add call, and that's all our API is created for this particular sample. So we can now carry on. Okay, so now it's time to put some interactivity into our application. We're now going to configure the actions for the actual send button down the bottom here. So let's just, with that selected, open up the action flow editor, and here we go. So the first thing that we need to do is create an instance of our content object and apply that to our chat history. So when we type that first thing in on the keyboard and hit send, we want to add that to the chat history. That's going to be the first one that's going to appear in the list. So the way that we do that is with the first action added, we just type in state here, and we can update the component state, choose the add fields here, and we are going to choose a chat history because we're now going to kind of add that item in there. Now with this select update type, we're now going to add to the list, choose the value to add, and this time we're going to choose the content option here. So choose content, and now we're going to set the fields of that content before we add it to the chat history. So say add fields, we're going to move to text, choose the text option here. We're going to now choose the text data type, choose text, and we're going to set the fields on that. So the value is going to be the text that's being keyed in on the actual on the actual UI itself. So just select that. We can move to the widget state, and we're going to pick up the text field. So the widget state of that text field is going to be the text that it contains. So just confirm that, that's all there, and then confirm that again. And then we've now got this created content object. Okay, now we can see here that we're now adding that to the list. That's the first thing that we're going to want to do. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to then kind of make the little kind of animated kind of text kind of little circles there kind of do its thing. So we're going to basically show the visibility of that. So on the add field, now we're going to go to then the AI responding, and we're going to just we're going to toggle the value, and that will, of course, at the moment is false. We're going to toggle that to true, and then at the end of this particular action flow, we're then going to toggle that again, and of course it will just set it back to false again. So next what we're going to do is hit the plus here. We're now going to add the action, and this is where we're now going to call the API. So just choose API here, just do a search API and then select that. Now the group here is going to be BuildShip, and of course the endpoint is then going to be chat. That's already selected for us because it's the only one that we've got in the list here. We can now set those variables. So now we're setting the variables. We're now going to set the thread ID. Now if you remember, we're storing this currently in the page state. So we can go here, the component state, go to component state here, and it's here as a thread ID. And once that's set, we can pass that back in. And of course, in the very first instance, this is not going to be set, but of course at the end of this workflow, once the result has come back from the from BuildShip, we're then going to sort of update the thread ID with then the latest thread that comes back. So then we can always keep using that while we're using this particular instance of the actual component itself. Choose the set additional variables as well. Go to the variable name here and the prompt itself. So this again is just going to be the text that we're going to pass in. So just choose the value, and this time we can just really go straight to the widget state here and just pull that text out. So we've got that, that's good. We just want to give this a bit more of a better name here. I always recommend API to kind of sort of give this a good name. API chat result, that's good. So of course the API result, and if it succeeds, we get a kind of an OK back. We're going to head in this particular direction. So we would have got a response back there from BuildShip at this point. Okay, so next up, what we're going to do is now going to update the component state. So the first thing that we're going to do is just go to state here and do an update component state and then add the fields. This is what we're going to do. We're going to set the thread ID now. So this is obviously the result has come back at this particular state. So just choose a thread ID, and we're going to go to select the type here. It's going to be set value, and the value that we want to select is going to be now as a response from the action output. So just choose that. Here is the chat result that's come back, and the API response. Now this is going to be really just the JSON body. Now we're going to navigate our way down into the particular result that comes back. So we're going to choose JSON path, and this time we're going to go to the result that's come back. So if you remember, the result is kind of what is from the actual JSON response that comes back at the very top level. We got the result. That's what we had at BuildShip right down at the bottom on that API response. So we've got result, and of course as part of the result, one of the very high level items that's in that is then actually the thread ID like that. So the result.thread ID. So we're going to now literally just save that into then that particular kind of value that we're tracking with inside the component state. So now that's all set. We can also now just set the actual chat history now. So we're going to navigate our way now down into the precise area that we need to pull out the latest message that's come back in. You kind of got like an array of messages that come back. We want the very, very first one every single time. So what we can do is we can go to select update type here. We're going to say add to list, choose the value to add. So move down here into then the action outputs, and here's the API chat result again. Just select this option here. We're going to say the JSON body this time. We're now going to kind of set the JSON path, and if we now work our way down to the precise point in that API kind of result where we kind of got the content and then the text. So that's exactly what we're going to do now. Is we're going to just select this and say result.messages. And then we're going to open up our messages. It's the very, very first one that we would like. So we put it in sort of square brackets in the 0, full stop, and then content, and then 0, again, the very, very first one. like that, and then we're going to kind of automatically map it to our data type. Okay, so we're going to let kind of FlutterFlow do its work under the covers, and then of course here we're just going to choose then the content data type. So everything within inside that particular path is then going to be converted to the data type of type content, and just hit confirm like that, and that is all set. So just to summarize then, so here is the result that's coming back then from that we're actually taking receipt of with inside FlutterFlow. And what we're doing, we're kind of navigating our way down here. So here's the kind of the result here. So we're going to navigate our way down into then the messages itself. Here it is. And when we put the square bracket 0, we're going to say, right, we want this very, very first one here. So we've got that. And then we start working our way down. And then we move then down into the content. And then with inside that, this is, of course, this is an array. So we just want to pick up the very first one, which is this one here. So pick that one up, and of course now you can see that this is kind of the object that we've got at this particular point. And so then we're really just converting that then into then a content type, and the text and the value is already included into it. So that's what's going to kind of get mapped back to our data type. Okay, so of course if things go sort of not very well for us, let's just put a snack bar message on the screen. So just hit the plus, add action, just do a search for snack bar here. I'm just going to put a message in here just to kind of say that they can't do the chat this particular time. I'm just going to change the background color to be the kind of the tertiary just red at the moment. That's good. So we just got a bit of an error handling condition there. Oh, open up the action flow. So right, so let's now move down into this particular one here. So we just need to hit the plus, add the action, and this again is going to be a state change. So update the component state, and all we're simply doing here is kind of then now toggling the response, the actual kind of little animation that we got down the bottom there. So just choose that and say toggle value. So at the top here, we've kind of marked it as true, and then here we're going to mark it as false because we're back with our response and everything is good. Just one other little thing that I just want to add in here. One thing that I kind of I sort of missed is once we've kind of updated the component state here and we're making the API call, we're probably going to want to clear out the text from the actual text field itself. So just press plus here, add the action. So if I just do a search for form here, and we can say reset form fields, just choose that one there, and we can choose then the text field is the one that we've kind of got with inside the UI. Actually, I'll tell you what, we probably need to move that down one actually, because what's going to end up happening is we're going to end up wiping out the text field before we've actually added it into the API call. So just make sure that that one comes after. There we go. So that's all good. Now we just need to carry on doing a little bit of work down here. So we just need to hit the plus. We need to give our time for our UI to kind of update. So let's just put a little wait here. So let's just put a wait delay here. We're just going to put the 800 in here, which will give it a little delay, and then a plus. We then can then scroll to then the bottom of the actual list view itself. So you can hear we've got a list view. So we're just going to scroll to the end. That's good. So that just means it gives a little bit of our UI time to update, and then we're going to kind of scroll to the bottom of the list view. So I think we are good. I don't think we've made any mistakes there. We'll soon find out when we try running this up. So hit close. Okay, so I think we're in a position where we can quickly try this now. It'll probably go horribly wrong and we'll probably have to come and fix something, but let's move over to test mode and let's spin this up and let's see what happens. Okay, so here we are then. The application's all loaded up. I'm feeling a bit nervous about this because we've done that at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Let's hit the little chat option. Oh, there we go. We've got our kind of our window up, which is really nice. So let's try putting a prompt in. So let's just going to do the, yeah, my computer is overheating, something like that. And then hit the send. Okay, that's looking good. We've got our message at the top here. Wow, look, we've got a response back. That's not bad, going for a very, very quick run through on that. So that's looking good. Let's see if it can tell me a little bit more. I'm going to say my CPU is getting too hot. Let's just hit the send there. Thinking about it. There we go. So you can just see that little bit of a delay there before the UI scrolls up. That's quite nice. We kind of need that. But you might want to reduce it a little bit. 800, you could drop it down to 500, maybe 400. Might just speed things up a little bit. But it's looking like we're kind of maintaining a conversation here, which is fantastic. So brilliant. Let's just move over to FlutterFlow now. Just a couple of kind of wrap-up thoughts for you as well on this particular sample. So firstly, please do check the link in the description for a slightly bolstered version of this particular sample. A little bit of animation in there, that type of of thing. Just a couple of little wrap-up thoughts, because I know I'm probably going to get some questions about this. As you probably saw, what I've done is I've created all of the kind of component state within inside the component itself. Now, what that naturally means is that as soon as I close down that chat window by clicking away, then what will happen is obviously I'll then lose all of my previous history and stuff like that. So feel free to, instead of using component state, you can use application state if you would like to maintain the history of the conversation. You'll obviously have to make sure that you kind of provide options for the user to kind of like reset the thread and reset the chat history back to, or kind of all, everything being removed from the list. So there's also enhancements you can make to this, but it's a great starter if trying to implement something like that into your own projects. You've also probably noticed as well that on the floating action button, if I bring up the actions here and look at this here, you can see that I didn't kind of put any of these particular options on, like non-dismissible. I could have toggled that on, which would have meant that I could have clicked anywhere outside of this and the chat window would have remained. But of course I didn't have a close option within inside the actual component itself. So feel free to kind of add a kind of a close action on that if you would like to keep the non-dismissible here. So it just prevents the user from accidentally clicking away outside of the kind of the boundary to then lose that particular chat there as well. So again, there's lots of little enhancements that you can make with inside this particular sample. So that's pretty well much. Hopefully you enjoyed that. That was just like a million miles an hour introducing the BuildShip AI kind of assistant nodes within inside of FlutterFlow. So you can just see now that it just makes your life so much easier when working with the OpenAI platform, certainly assistants themselves. But remember, with inside BuildShip, that particular node is so much more powerful, and I kind of urge you to kind of have a look at the BuildShip documentation, because they've got some really, really good samples. There's probably about 5 kind of examples actually of different ways that you can actually use that particular assistant. So I encourage you to go and have a look at that. Have a look at some of the templates as well. This is really just a very, very simple kind of chatbot example that I thought I'll bring to your attention, just as the BuildShip team have released this particular node recently. So thank you for watching. If you've been watching this with inside the Nocode Academy, thank you for being there. Of course, if you'd like to join and become a member of that academy, the link is in the description, of course. And if you watch this on YouTube, thank you for being a subscriber. And I really do encourage you to like the videos. I really do appreciate all of your likes on my videos. So until the next video, until the next walkthrough video, thank you for joining, and I'll see you soon.